Growing up, the differences between me and Ben were impossible to ignore. I was the one who always had to work harder, do more, prove myself. I'd get home from school and head straight to my part-time job, stacking shelves, washing dishes, doing whatever it took to help pay bills. Meanwhile, Ben, 2 years younger, had it easy. He'd breeze through his day, all smiles, while Mom and Dad took care of everything for him. They'd talk about his grades, his soccer games, his friends, and when they weren't talking about Ben, they were praising him. Always Ben. I didn't mind at first, or at least I told myself I didn't. I figured if I just kept pushing, kept doing things on my own, that would be enough. I didn't need praise. I'd show them, show everyone, that I could make it. I'd be the strong one, the independent one, the one who didn't ask for anything because I didn't need to. But it wasn't like I had a choice. I was the oldest, and I understood early on that I couldn't rely on anyone. It's funny how that becomes your truth, even when you're just a kid. So, I worked harder, kept my mouth shut, and kept my eyes on the future. Ben would get everything handed to him, and I'd do it all myself. The day the college acceptances came was when it really hit me. Ben got into the same school I did, an accounting program, something we'd both been aiming for. But while Ben was busy texting friends, I was stuck figuring out how I'd afford the tuition. I thought, maybe this time they'll help me out, just this once. But they didn't. The conversation I overheard that night made it clear. My parents were already planning to pay for Ben's tuition. They had no intention of helping me, not even with a loan. I could hear Mom's voice in the other room, soft and certain as she told Dad, "Cam's always been the one to figure things out. He'll be fine." The words were like a punch in the gut. I stood there, frozen, as the air in the room seemed to close in on me. I wasn't the one who needed help, not according to them. It was like I was invisible, a ghost in my own family. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to. I told myself I could handle this. I'd make it work, just like I always had. But something inside me snapped. I wouldn't ask for anything again, ever, and I meant it. It wasn't easy. I never expected it to be. But every day, every damn day, it felt like I was pushing against something that wouldn't budge. College was a grind, a real grind. I spent my nights working at the bar, cleaning tables, serving drinks, doing whatever I could to make enough to cover books, rent, and whatever else came up. The hours were long, the tips were shit, and my sleep was non-existent. But I didn't complain. I couldn't. Meanwhile, Ben lived the life I could have only dreamed of. He was in the dorms, partying with his friends, sleeping in until noon, and focusing on his social life like it was the most important thing in the world. I used to tell myself it was fine. I'd get through it. I was used to it after all. I was built for this, the work, the struggle. But it was hard not to notice how different things were between us. Every time Mom called to check in on Ben, asking how he was doing, if he needed anything, if he was getting enough sleep, I had to fight the urge to snap. Not once did she ask about me. Not once did she say, "How's Cam doing? How's school going for him?" It was always Ben. It was like I wasn't even there. I tried to brush it off. That's just how things were, right? Ben was the golden child, the one who got everything handed to him. It didn't matter that I was killing myself working nights, studying every free minute I had, doing everything on my own. I was supposed to be fine. I was supposed to be the strong one, the one who didn't need anyone. At family gatherings, it was always the same. Ben would talk about his classes, his friends, whatever new thing he was into, and my parents would hang on every word, nodding and smiling like he was the only thing that mattered. And me, I stayed quiet. It wasn't worth it to bring up how I was busting my ass just to keep up. It wasn't worth it to mention that I'd worked 3 shifts that week or that I barely had time to eat, let alone have a life outside of school and work. Still, I pushed on. I couldn't let them see me break. I had to keep going. I couldn't let them see me as weak, as someone who couldn't handle it. So I kept my head down and worked harder, but the weight of it all was starting to take its toll. I was exhausted. My back ached. My hands were raw from cleaning the same damn tables every night. And my brain, it felt like it was on fire, never stopping, always thinking about the next test, the next deadline. And then, one night, as I was coming home from my shift, I heard them. Ben and Mom talking in the living room. I froze just outside the door, my hand on the handle, the words cutting through the air. "You know, it's just so much easier for you, Ben," Mom was saying. "Cam, he's always been fine. He doesn't need help. But you deserve this. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to know that Ben, who'd barely lifted a finger in his life, was getting sympathy. That he, the one who never had to struggle, was the one who was deserving. I stood there in the doorway, not moving, not making a sound. I couldn't breathe. The truth of it hit me like a brick. It's always been like this. They didn't see me. Not really, they never would. And for the first time, it wasn't just the exhaustion that weighed me down. It was the realization that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I achieved, it would never be enough for them. They had their golden boy, and I was just the one who'd figure it out. Always. The tuition deadline was only a few days away, and I was short. Not just a little short, way short. I'd been scraping by, paying for books and rent with whatever I could make, but now this big chunk of money was staring me in the face, and I had no idea how I was going to come up with it. The last few days had been a blur of long shifts, hours of studying, and too many cups of coffee. My brain felt like it was running on fumes, but my body wasn't giving up. Not yet anyway. I knew I had to do something. I'd avoided calling home for weeks now, convinced I could do this on my own. But now, staring at the tuition balance on my laptop, I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't an issue. I couldn't keep convincing myself I didn't need help. So I did the thing I had promised myself I wouldn't. I called my mom. She picked up after a few rings, her voice too bright, like she hadn't just been waiting to hear from me. "Hey Cam, how's everything going?" "Good," I said, my voice flat. "Listen, I'm in a bit of a bind with tuition. I was wondering if you and Dad could help me out with a loan, something I can pay back after I graduate." There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough to make me feel stupid for even asking. "Well," she said finally, "we've already paid for Ben's tuition. He's still settling in, and we wanted to make sure he had everything he needed." The words landed heavy, thick, like I was being suffocated by them. I wasn't even surprised. I don't think I've been surprised by anything they've done in a long time. But hearing it out loud, hearing her say it so easily, it made something inside me snap. "You've always figured things out, Cam. You'll be fine." Just like that. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Just, "You'll be fine." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't speak. I didn't have to. She didn't even give me a chance to explain, to tell her how tired I was, how hard I was fighting to keep this all together. How the hell was I supposed to figure it out this time when I didn't have the energy left to breathe? I mumbled something about being fine, hung up, and sat there in the silence of my room. My phone felt too heavy in my hand, like it was carrying all the weight of what I'd just heard. "You'll be fine." That was it. That was how it was always going to be. I'd always been the one who didn't need help. I was the one who was strong enough, smart enough, resourceful enough to handle it. But right then, it felt like they just pulled the rug out from under me. Like I didn't even matter enough to deserve the same chance Ben got. I wasn't even worth the thought of help. I stared at the phone screen, feeling the weight of it all pressing in. The words echoed in my head. "You'll be fine." And you know what? I would be fine. I'd figure it out, just like they said. But this time, I wasn't going to rely on them for anything, ever, again. Something shifted in me then. A quiet, stubborn kind of determination filled the empty spaces inside me. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small anymore. I was done asking for help. I'd proved to myself, no, to everyone, that I didn't need anyone. I was going to make it on my own, no matter what it took. The next few months were a blur. I woke up early before the sun and hit the library. It was the only place I could find quiet. Everyone else was still sleeping, and the world felt like it belonged to me for a few hours. It was just me and the textbooks, the pages turning under my tired hands. I buried myself in the material. I told myself if I could just get through this, if I could make my grades shine, then maybe, just maybe, it would make all the crap I was going through feel worth it. I cut back on my shifts at the bar. My body was wrecked, and the long nights weren't doing me any favors. I needed to focus. So I started networking, reaching out to professors, going to career fairs, trying to get a foot in the door for internships. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was something, and it felt like something that could finally get me where I wanted to go. Dr. Hargrove, one of my accounting professors, noticed the change. He was a quiet guy, always sitting at the front of the lecture hall, scribbling notes as he talked. But after class one day, he stopped me as I was packing up. "Cam," he said, his voice low, "I've been noticing your work. You're dedicated. Have you thought about helping with some of the research projects in the department? You could earn extra credit, and I'd be happy to provide recommendations for internships, maybe even for a job after you graduate. I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that he'd been paying attention or the fact that he believed in me enough to offer me this. In that moment, I felt something crack open inside me. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was recognition. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Not by my parents, not by Ben, but by someone who knew what it was like to push, to struggle, to make something out of nothing. So, I took it. I dove into the work, staying up late most nights, going over spreadsheets, doing research, refining my skills. Every day felt like a battle, but slowly things started to click. My grades went up. The papers I handed in weren't just good, they were great. I started feeling like I wasn't just trying to survive college anymore. I was building something real. One afternoon, Dr. Hargrove pulled me aside again. "Cam," he said, his tone serious but not cold. "I've been impressed by your growth this semester. I think you're ready for something bigger. I'm nominating you for a scholarship. It's competitive, but you've got the potential. A scholarship." It wasn't a handout. It was something I had earned, and for the first time in my life, it felt like I was being recognized for me, not for being the strong one, or the guy who always figured it out on his own. I hadn't had to beg for it. I hadn't had to depend on anyone else. I'd done it. I left Dr. Hargrove's office that day feeling like I'd been handed something I didn't even know I wanted. An opportunity to prove that I could do this, that I could succeed without ever needing to ask my parents for a thing. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was building, and that felt different. Real. The scholarship opportunity felt like a turning point. Not just another thing I could use to get by, but a chance to prove to myself and the world that I wasn't just surviving college, I was going to make something of it. It was everything I'd been working for, a way to show I had value beyond the work I put in, beyond being the guy who had to do it all alone. I spent every free moment refining my application. The scholarship wasn't just about good grades. It was about who you were, what you stood for, and what you could offer. And this was my shot. It wasn't luck that had gotten me this far. It was hard work, late nights, and sacrifices. And now, I was going to make it count. Dr. Hargrove helped me fine-tune my essays. He wasn't one to sugarcoat things, but when I showed him my drafts, he was impressed. "This is exactly the kind of drive we need in the field," he told me one day after reading through my final version. "You've got a strong story. Make sure they hear it." I made sure they would. I poured everything into that application. Every part of me went into those words. I didn't need to tell my parents or Ben. I didn't want their approval. I didn't want their input. This was mine, and I was doing it on my own terms. Each night I stayed late at the library, running through my essays again and again, making sure every detail was right, down to the last comma. I couldn't afford to mess up. This wasn't just about getting a scholarship. It was about proving I could succeed without leaning on anyone else, without anyone else's help. When the day came for the results to be announced, my stomach was a ball of nerves. I sat at my desk, staring at my inbox, my finger hovering over the mouse. Part of me didn't even want to open the email. I knew if I didn't, I could keep pretending that I was fine, but I couldn't let it go. Not now. I clicked. The email loaded slowly, and my heart was pounding so hard in my chest, I thought it might burst. I skimmed the first few lines, not really seeing anything. But then, there it was. "Congratulations, Cam." I stopped breathing. For a second, I just sat there, staring at the screen, my eyes blurring. I read it again, just to be sure. I had been selected for the scholarship. I let out a shaky breath. It didn't feel real at first. It couldn't. This was mine, a direct result of everything I'd worked for. Not because of my parents, not because of Ben, not because of anyone else. Just me. It was mine. I had earned it. And the twist? The scholarship didn't just cover tuition. As part of it, I was offered an internship at a top firm in New York. It felt surreal, like someone had dropped a dream in my lap. I was going to New York, a place I'd only seen in movies, a place that felt like 1,000,000 miles away from my life. But there it was, an opportunity, handed to me on my own terms. I sat there for a long time, the weight of it settling in. I hadn't relied on anyone. I hadn't asked for help. I had done this. And now, doors I'd never thought possible were opening in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The night of the awards ceremony, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the kind that comes from someone else's praise, but the kind that comes from knowing I had earned it on my own. I'd worked for this. Every sleepless night, every hour I'd put in at the library, every time I'd sacrificed just to make it this far, it had all led to this moment. My parents were there, of course. They always showed up to these things, but they had no idea what kind of award this was. To them, it was just another university event, something to check off the list. Ben was with them, standing a little too close to Mom, as always. His casual smile was just one more reminder of how different our lives had always been. When they called my name, the room seemed to quiet for a second. The announcer spoke about my resilience, my hard work, and how I'd refused to rely on anyone, always figuring it out on my own. I heard those words, but they didn't fully register. I wasn't just hearing praise. I was hearing the truth I'd fought for, the truth that had made me who I was. I wasn't the kid who'd been handed everything. I wasn't the one who'd been coddled. I was the one who had built myself from the ground up. The applause was deafening. I stood there for a moment, not sure if I wanted to smile, cry, or just stand still and let the weight of it all settle. I was more than just a kid from a working-class family now. I had done it. I had earned this. As I walked across the stage, I saw my mother's frozen smile, her hands clapping mechanically. My father was frowning, confused, like he was trying to figure out what all the fuss was about. And then there was Ben. He was standing there, his face a mix of surprise and disbelief. I almost wanted to laugh. This was supposed to be his moment, but it wasn't. Not anymore. When I made it to the other side of the stage, I felt this strange calm. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their applause. After the ceremony, my mother tried to approach me, her usual attempt to act like everything was fine, like I was just another one of her kids. She stepped toward me, arms open for a hug, but I stepped back before she could get close. "Cam," she said, her voice uncertain. "That was wonderful. You've really come so far." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something that hit harder than anything. Their approval, their praise, none of it mattered. Not anymore. They didn't know me. They never had. They saw a version of me they created in their minds, the one who could handle everything on his own, who didn't need anyone. But that wasn't me anymore. That person was gone. I turned my back on her, on them, and walked away. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of closure. This wasn't about their validation. It never had been. This success was mine. And walking away from them felt like stepping into a future I could own, completely and entirely on my own terms. I accepted the offer, the job in New York, at a top firm I'd only dreamed of working for. It was everything I'd been working toward. No more scraping by, no more hiding in the shadows of other people's expectations. This was mine. This life was mine, all because of the work I'd put in. The sacrifices, the hours of sleepless nights, the loneliness, it had all led to this. The first few weeks in the city were a blur. I moved into a small apartment in a quiet part of Manhattan, a place just big enough for me and my ambitions. I liked the stillness of it, the fact that I could just be, without anyone around to remind me of what I used to be, or who I used to try to please. No more pretending, no more waiting for validation that was never coming. I kept in touch with Dr. Hargrove, of course. He was the one person who'd seen me for who I really was, the one who knew I had more potential than anyone had ever believed. He'd send the occasional message, checking in, offering advice. It felt good to know he was still rooting for me, even now that I was far away. One evening, as I was settling in after a long day at work, I got a text from my mom. "Hi, Cam. We want to celebrate your success. Let's do something soon. We're so proud of you." I read the message twice, wondering how I felt about it. For a moment, I thought about picking up the phone and calling her, maybe telling her all about my new life, my new job, the city I was living in. I thought about what it would be like to reconnect, to act like everything was the same, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had spent too long chasing something I would never get from them, something that didn't matter anymore, their approval, their pride. Instead, I sent a quick reply. "Thanks, but I've got a busy schedule." It wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm either. It was honest. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't need to explain myself to them. They didn't need to be part of this new chapter of my life. I had built this on my own. I put my phone down and looked out the window. The skyline stretched before me, lit up by thousands of lights, each one a symbol of a future I was now a part of. I'd worked hard for this. I'd fought for it. No one could take it from me. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace. Not because I was successful, but because I had finally stopped needing anyone else to validate my worth. I was here. I had made it, and that was enough. As I watched the city buzz beneath me, I realized I finally had everything I'd ever wanted. And it wasn't because of my family. It wasn't because of luck. It was because of me, and no one could take that away.